Hello everyone, it's Jimmy here. In today's video, I'm going to review probably one of the hottest camera recently, which is the Fujifilm GFX100RF. Now, you've probably seen tons of reviews online already where they've pretty much gone over the specs and the highlights of this camera. And I personally think there has been an overemphasis on the different dials that they put in this camera, including the crop dial, the aspect ratio dial. All these things are wonderful. I personally don't care about these that much. And in today's video, I'm trying to give you a fresh perspective and share with you some of the quirks, or rather odd design choices they've made with this camera. Not the f4, not the IBIS, because these are well known, but rather the user experience. And especially compared to the other two cameras here, and we will dive deeper into that in a bit. And the format of today's video, as usual, is first handling and build quality, and then a very straightforward image quality, or rather image rendition comparison of these three cameras. And yeah, this is gonna be my first hands-on sort of review, which I will probably, hopefully, keep this camera for longer and give you guys more longer-term reviews in the future. Yeah, here we go. The first thing I want to talk about is why I bought this camera, aside from I wanted to test it, right? The reason being, this is the only product in the market that has a medium format sensor, but with a body weight and size of a full frame point and shoot camera, like this Leica Q. If you compare the Q3 with the GFX100RF, the GFX100RF is taller, but it's a little bit narrower. The lens of the GFX RF is actually a highlight because if we take the adapter off, as you can see here, it is very, very short. So in a sense, this becomes a much more pocketable camera compared to the Q3, where the lens sticks out quite a bit, right? And that leads me to the first quirk or odd design choice they made with this camera. And that is, in order to have this lens properly protected, you're forced to not only put on this adapter and also this really long lens hood, making this lens almost identical to the Leica Q3, which sort of defeats the purpose of making this lens this small, right? And which also sort of defeats the trade-off that they made, which is to make this lens an f4. Now, initially, I was all for it because I've always wanted a point and shoot camera that has a smaller lens than the Q3, but in the meantime offers uncompromised image quality. But now that I've used it, I feel like it's such a wasted opportunity. The reason why they force you to put this adapter on is because the lens does not focus internally, which means there's a part of the lens will stick out when you focus. So if that's the case, I mean, this is sort of like cheating, right? Because the lens, if you make it internally focused, this lens would be, at least this size. So yeah, this is the first big disappointment that I got when I received the camera. And the second disappointment I have is the grip on this camera. As you can see, is very small, right? It's much smaller than the Hasselblad here. And compared to the Leica has no grip, but the Leica, even without this thumb grip that I've put it on, even you take it away, there is a thumb rest where you can put your thumb and still have a relatively comfortable hold to the camera. But on the Fujifilm, there's no recessed area here, so there's nowhere you can rest your thumb, and there's buttons here, there's a wheel here. It makes holding this camera feel really uncomfortable. So the only way you can hold this camera is by having your left hand underneath the lens and hold it like that. But one of the largest advantage of a point shoot camera like the Leica is where you can operate the camera single-handedly without using your other hand, and it might come in handy in some situations. So yeah, these are the two major complaints that I had after I bought the camera, and I was not expecting them before, I put my hands on it. In terms of build quality, it's quite solid. Like all the wheels are very, very well dampened. I have no complaints at all. And all the buttons are also very solid. The camera feels very premium, which it should be because it costs quite a fortune. Now, compared to the Leica, I still think the Leica has a little bit better build quality. And compared to the Hasselblad, the machined aluminum unibody just feels a little bit more premium than the Fujifilm. But by no means is the Fujifilm not a well-built camera. Compared to the majority of full-frame cameras on the market, it still feels quite premium. So next up is, why did I include the Hasselblad X1Dii Mark II and the Leica Q3 in the comparison video? The reason being, the Q3 is a natural competitor to the Fujifilm GFX100RF. They are tailored towards, I would say, similar audiences. They're both, fixed lens 28mm full frame equivalent point shoot cameras. The only difference being one is full frame and the other is medium format. And one might argue, well, you can't really compare these two because of the different sensor size. But again, there's simply no competitor for the GFX RF, and if you need to find one, I would say the Q3 is the closest. Hence, the Q3 is here. What about the Hasselblad X1Dii? Now, it's interesting because if you compare the size of these two cameras, they are actually quite similar, aside from the bigger grip for the Hasselblad, which made the Hasselblad a lot more secure in your hand. And if you pair it with a, for example, the 45p in this case, or a 28p, size-wise, they're really quite similar, but the Hasselblad is a lot heavier. In fact, just the Hasselblad body alone is a bit heavier than the Fujifilm GFX100RF, let alone adding another lens onto the body. Now, another reason that I want to include this camera here is the Hasselblad also does not have IBIS. They're also sitting at a very similar price point if you include the lens for the Hasselblad. So I think if people are in the market for a medium format camera, they might cross-shop these two. So yeah, that's the handling and build quality section. So in conclusion, the Fujifilm GFX RF falls short in terms of the handling, the grip especially, but the build quality is there. All the essential control knobs and wheels and whatnot feels very good. Oh, one other thing is the lack of a directional pad here in the back. So you're forced to use this little knob here to navigate your manual. Well, of course, you can also touch control, whereas on the Leica, this directional pad here is just a much more comfortable user experience. So let's get that out of the way. Next up, we're going to take a look at a few set of photos. Now, this first set of photos are shot indoors with a bit of a mixed lighting condition. And as you can see, compared to the Hasselblad, which I will consider is the gold standard for color accuracy and, white balance, I feel the Fujifilm is just a tad too vibrant, right? Like everything just feels a bit overdone, especially with the built-in standard Provia profile. And if we change the profile to Real AAs, the results, is a little bit better, but still, I feel the Hasselblad just feels a bit more natural. And if we compare it to the Leica being a 1.7, of course, yields a much thinner depth of field. And also, the same trend we see here is the Fujifilm is just a bit more vibrant than the Leica, especially in the standard Provia profile. Again, switching to Real AAs, making things a little bit better. But color is never an issue with, these kind of cameras because it's got 16-bit color depth. So there's a tremendous amount of latitude for you to tweak your photos to your liking. So with a little bit of white balance and, saturation adjustment, for example, this set of photos here, the Fujifilm looks much more similar to the Hasselblad now. And I will say if you're a, professional photographer or enthusiast, you probably have your own profiles. But if you don't like post-processing and you don't like tweaking your colors, then you're stuck with sort of unnatural color, especially in mixed lighting conditions. Now, if we go outside and take a look at these set of photos, again, the Fujifilm is a little bit more saturated, but in this case, it actually looks fine. And I will actually say, if we compare it to the Leica, the Fujifilm color is a tiny bit more pleasant to my eyes. If instead of the standard profile, I use my own profile, which I created for my Leica camera. In this case, the Fuji and Hasselblad looks a bit closer to each other. And if we zoom in, we can see that the quality, the optical quality of this lens is actually quite amazing. It's very, very sharp. I would say it's even a little bit sharper than the Hasselblad 45p in this case, which I would say is to be expected because this is a fixed lens camera. Alright, so in this next set of photos, I'm mainly going to show you the minimum focus distance and the rendering at minimum focus distance for these three cameras. Now, as you can see here, the GFX100RF and the Hasselblad 45p actually yields a quite similar magnification. And if we compare to the Leica, in normal mode, they're also quite similar. And of course, the Q3 has this cheating mode here, where by twisting the macro ring, you can get much closer to the subject. Alright, so what is the takeaway here? Well, at least my hands-on experience with the GFX100RF isn't perfect. For example, I don't quite like the ergonomics of it. I don't quite like the fact that you have to put an adapter ring and another lens hood on top of the lens, which sort of defeats the purpose of making this lens f4. In terms of image quality, from the limited amount of testing I've done, it's good, but its color science is still a bit behind Hasselblad. But luckily, it's got 6-bit color depth, so it's not too hard to fine-tune it in the post. Another thing is, I feel like the autofocus on the Fuji, especially while I was taking photos of the baby, is actually quite a bit snappier than the Leica, and the Hasselblad's autofocus is pretty much useless, so that might be a deciding factor for you as well. Now, would I keep this camera? Would it replace my Leica Q3? That decision will be made after I took this camera out and take more photos in the open. I will definitely share this journey with you guys, so if you're interested in this camera, please stay tuned and keep following the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, bye.